We're back on Fight News Now with John Ramdeen and Robin Black. Some other news to get into. Conor McGregor decided to send out a tweet in the middle of the night, Sunday night, announcing he was back on UFC 200 and thanking Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta. And then Monday morning, Dana White shot this down saying, no, he's not. We haven't even talked to him or his management since the press conference. So we are no further ahead than we were before. And I think, for me, I think this is an example of Conor McGregor crying wolf now twice and just outright lying to the public. First about the retirement, now about the fight being back on. I think he's played his public sympathy card one too many times, and I think people are now, instead of clamoring for this fight, which I think was the intent of this, to somewhat leverage some of this to his side, I think people are just kind of groaning at this and just like, deal with your problem and let us know when there's a conclusion, because we don't believe this fight's happening. And I don't think there's a whole lot of sympathy on Conor McGregor's side after this.
True. We should just forget about Conor, and because we do have some clarity. Clarity is Jon Jones, for the most part, not injured after 25 minutes with OSP. The UFC trying to put together the biggest fights they possibly can for UFC 200. One of the fights they were teasing is the rematch between Daniel Cormier and Jon Jones going down at UFC 200. So if Jon Jones is not injured, he gets medically cleared, I would not be surprised, as long as Daniel Cormier is healthy, that's the fight that will headline UFC 200.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, Twitter's a weird thing, and any of these things are. The intent of something like this is to get a reaction. The thing you don't realize when you go to tweet something with the intent of getting a reaction is you don't get to pick what reaction you're going to get. And you can try this yourself. Go try a tweet. Think you know what you're trying to say, or that people can read your sense of humor or get sarcasm. They can't. The audience will decide how they feel about it. They reacted very positively to he's going to retire. It's like, what's going on? Is he okay? What's happening? And not so positively to the second one.
No, I think he kind of fell in love with the reaction he got last week, where it was massive news. And I don't know what the idea was here. I mean, he sends in the middle of the night, where I think maybe
that's Monday morning and where he is.
It is, but it's still, you're talking, this went out at like 1:45 in the morning. Yeah. So you're looking at, anyway, regardless of the time, most people in North America woke up to the fact that Dana White said exactly what they went to sleep thinking, that this fight wasn't happening. And maybe he believed that saying this fight was on would create such a massive buzz that how can the UFC break everyone's feelings here, break them down yet again. That wasn't the case. And to be quite honest, I think the UFC, for their part, have played this. They have stayed on the same message this whole time, and they're going ahead, and they're going to do a very big number for UFC 200. Not as big as what Conor and Nate would bring, but it seems that the UFC, I don't think they have been hurt all that much by this, and I think this last move by Conor, I think it's kind of showing his hand here. He wants to be on this card, and the UFC is not selling a thing here. They're like, we'll move on without you. We're okay.
Yeah, well, again, Dana White said that basically his entire roster wants to be a part of UFC 200 or be on one of the cards that's happening during International Fight Week. You could understand why entertainers would want to be a part of this historic event. Clearly, Conor wants to be a part of it. That's why he was focused on doing the thing that he needed to do, that is train for the rematch with Nathan Diaz. I think if you talk to Conor McGregor and his team and this is the outcome, there's no fight happening at UFC 200, I'm pretty sure he would have rethought the way that he's dealt with everything.
Yeah, some smart approach by the UFC for sure. But just think of some of this math. Just kind of give it a thought. Imagine they were going to do 1.8 million pay-per-views with Conor on it, and now they'll still do a really good show. Let's say they do 1.3, just we're making up numbers. So they'll lose 500,000 pay-per-views. Then you put Conor on UFC 200, or 202, or 203, or something where you didn't really have much and all your champions and stars have already fought. All of a sudden, a show that maybe would have done 400,000 pay-per-views does 1.4 million. You lost 500,000 pay-per-view buys on UFC 200 and gained 1 million under this scenario, so they win.
Robin, black economics. That might be the end. That might be the scenario you see at the end of all of this. His teammate Paddy Holohan announced on Monday that he was retiring just days before his 28th birthday because of a rare blood disorder known as Factor 13.
1 in 5 million?
That's what he said was the statistic. So extremely rare, and something that he had hidden from the UFC, even hidden from his team. Now, this isn't a a blood disease that can be transferred for any of his opponents or training partners that would have been concerned. It only impacted him, but the UFC found out about this through a third party, and he's now out of his fight May the 8th, where he was to fight Willie Gates, and retiring at a very young age. This was someone who, had 5 fights in the UFC, and certainly somebody that part of that SBG Ireland crew that was a big part of that resurgence and kind of popularity boom in that part of the world.
Yeah, you feel bad for any individual that can't live out their dream based on their personal health, but that's the way things go. He says that the experience that he's gained from this, a whole bunch of opportunities that he wouldn't have had, at least he got to go and do something he wanted to do. Not everybody gets to do that in their life, so I'm sure he'll be able to carry this whether he decides to open his own academy or be a trainer or whatever the case may be, because he's fought at the highest level, it should help him in his life.
Very sweet guy,
Yeah,
Paddy
very good
Holohan. And this will give you a little insight. Just imagine, we were talking on 5 Rounds today about how beautiful fighting can be when you look at what it is these guys are really doing, and you look at how badly they want it. This guy wanted it badly enough that he kept an illness secret. He kept it secret even though it gave him more risks and that he shouldn't be fighting with that. He kept it secret because that's how badly he wanted to do that thing. That's a beautiful thing.
Quickly, let's discuss. Andrey Koreshkov looked outstanding Friday night, defeating Benson Henderson, winning every round of that fight. What do you attribute this to? Was it a lot based on the weight class? Because I think after that, Benson's in that tough spot where that's a big cut to 155 for him, but he faced a big welterweight, and Andrey Koreshkov has never looked better.
Yeah, holy smokes. I think so many factors. We've seen with the Russian fighters what they're capable of. We all expected that once the Russians started getting involved with mixed martial arts, they were going to shoot to the top of the list, and we're seeing that. Bellator is one of the organizations that first kind of profiled the Russian fighters, and Koreshkov has been one of the guys that we've kept an eye on. Losing to Askren, that's a life lesson, just like Henry Cejudo. I expect Cejudo to come back stronger than before this fight with Demetrius Johnson. Koreshkov, it did not matter who was standing in front of him. He was super aggressive. I talked about the flying attacks of Anthony Pettis and John Jones. We saw the same thing from Andrey Koreshkov. Ben Henderson showed a remarkable...
What he walked through was incredible.
Smokes, really? How he took the type of punishment that he took and maintained standing and still fighting. There were so many opportunities for him to bail in that fight. And Koreshkov, I think this is one guy that, Bellator and Scott Coker said the goal is to bring in high-profile fighters. We know that Rory McDonald's been offered, Ben Henderson, Matt Mitrione. He said also the goal is, in addition to getting the free agents, is try to build our own talent. He said, just like I did in Strikeforce, and Koreshkov is one of these guys. I think, you tune into Bellator to see some of the fighters that they picked up or the tournament winners, but it's some of their homegrown talent like Michael Chandler, like Will Brooks, and now like Andrey Koreshkov that you need to tune in to see.
Yeah, it was beautiful. He just managed the southpaw really, really well. He used his right hand, his right kick, his right knee so well to just kind of corral him. And you could feel, and this is a guy, Ben Henderson's been in there with the best fighters in the world, you could feel the pressure he was putting on him. Some of these Russians have there's something about the combat sambo or the hand-to-hand training over there where they control and manipulate distance and timing really well. That's something that is going up right across the world fighter-wise, but these guys have been very good at it for a long time.
Quickly, Rashad Evans is talking about going to 185, and recently we caught up with Firas Zahabi for his thoughts on the former light heavyweight champion cutting down.
I don't know. I think if Rashad is making the weight too easily, if he's making the weight and he feels he has a lot more to do, I think he should experiment with 185 because he's not the tallest guy. He doesn't have the longest reach. At 205, he has a very short reach for 205. So I think at 185, he'd have a much easier time. But again, it's all about his body. How does his body feel when he does 205? It's got to be, 205 should be a really easy cut for him if he's thinking about doing 185.
That's all for us, and a special note that beginning next week, Fight News Now is moving time slots. We will be on weeknights at 6 p.m. Eastern Time starting next week.